The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 5. Into Battle. Chapter 23. The rainbow colors cleared away, leaving only a steady violet light. Tal blinked and felt the stone lid of the sarcophagus above him. "Adris?" he whispered. He felt cool shadow flesh across his arm as Adris slid out and up the side of the sarcophagus.
"Yes?"
"Just checking," whispered Tal. "Are you all right?"
"Einer is better than here,"
replied Adris.
"I don't like being a shadow."
"You'll get back there," said Tal. He said it automatically, but it stuck in his head and he paused to think about what he was saying. What would he do with Adris? It was now certain that Mila was right when she said that the Chosen should not have spirit shadows. In addition to saving the Veil, Tal would have to make sure all the spirit shadows the Chosen now had were sent back to Einer and made to stay there. This would include Adris. And what would happen to the Chosen when all their spirit shadows were gone and, as Tal admitted had to happen, the Underfolk were freed? Tal shook his head. Best he think like an ice carl and worry about the ice in front of him, not what lay behind or far ahead.
"There is something sharp and hot cutting into me,"
complained Adris.
"Can we get out now?"
"Sorry," apologized Tal. It was time to act, not lie there thinking. With Adris's help, he raised the lid of the sarcophagus a fraction and looked through the gap. The mausoleum was silent, and there were no bright lights disturbing its perpetual twilight. Tal could hear a lot of shouting in the distance, but it was far off and didn't seem to be coming any closer. He slid off the lid and climbed out. Adris flowed out after him. The red keystone was lying in the sarcophagus. Tal reached in and picked it up.
"The pocket doesn't work when I'm a shadow,"
said Adris, rubbing his stomach. Tal knew spirit shadows had difficulty handling sunstones, though they had no problem with normal items in the Dark World. He supposed it was another part of the mystery of their transformation between the worlds, the transformation that made them spirit shadows. Together they replaced the lid with its statue of the long-gone-to-dust occupant's spirit shadow. Then Tal held up the red keystone, his forehead wrinkled in thought. "I suppose I should release Lokar," he said, looking down at the half of the violet keystone on his finger. "If I can." Adris nodded firmly.
"Prison bad. Better to be free in the air."
"We'd better find somewhere to hide first," Tal said. He could still hear the shouting, and he wanted to know what was going on. But Adris was right. Now that he knew he might be able to release Lokar, he should do so as soon as possible. The antechamber where the Underfolk sculptors did the basic work on the statues that decorated the sarcophagi was deserted, as Tal had expected. He found a shielded spot between two columns of unworked stone and crouched down to concentrate on the red keystone. As before, he saw Lokar slowly swim into view. She was singing again, her spirit shadow still hopping. "Lokar!" Tal called out. "Lokar!" She paid him no attention. Tal called her name several times more before he realized that Lokar was particularly far gone this time. In desperation, he raised his own sunstone until it was adjacent to the red keystone, so he could focus on both at once. He didn't really know what he was doing, but he concentrated on the violet stone. Some instinct told him to try and build a wash of violet light that would flow over the red keystone and push its own light back. Violet light built and started to bleed into the red of the other keystone. As it spread, Lokar suddenly stopped singing. She looked up, stretched her hands toward Tal, and cried out, "Highness, release me! Release me!" For the first time that Tal had seen, her spirit shadow stopped circling, too. It mirrored Lokar's actions, stretching its paws to the sky. Violet light washed across them, a broad band against the red. Tal, still not knowing why he did it, directed it to loop behind and underneath Lokar. The light swept around her, and she threw herself into it. The next thing Tal knew, he was knocked to the ground, and there was someone lying on his chest. He crawled out and gently held Lokar up. She sobbed and clutched at him, then turned to run her hands along the stone before embracing her spirit shadow. Out of the keystone, she was older and smaller than Tal had imagined she'd be. Considerably older than his mother, and only 2/3 his height, she was a tiny, fine-boned woman with short silver hair and piercing brown eyes. She wore the robes of a brightness of the red, but had no sunstone. That had been taken by Sushin when she was first trapped in the keystone. Her spirit shadow was larger than she was. It was a leaper beast, an Ainir, an inhabitant of swampland and marshes. Its bulky, triangular body had massive hind legs, powering impressive leaps. Its forearms were smaller and ended in sharp claws. It also had a long and highly flexible tongue. Leaper beasts had learned to handle basic tools with their tongues, as well as weapons. They could sling a large stone several hundred stretches, an ability the spirit shadow form probably retained. It took Lokar a minute to stop sobbing and regain control. She pressed her palms against her face for a moment, then straightened up and looked at Tal. "Thank you," she said. She stared around her and added, "I saw the violet light. Where is the Empress?" Tal bit his lip. Instead of answering, he held up his hand, with his piece of the violet keystone shining there. Lokar looked puzzled, but slowly sank to one knee. She made an instinctive move to give him light before remembering she had no sunstone. "I don't understand," she said. "You are Tal, aren't you? How do you come to wield the violet keystone?" "You'd better stand up, or sit on that stone," Tal said. "It's kind of complicated." As quickly as he could, he told Lokar everything that had happened since he first fell from the Red Tower. That seemed like a very long time ago. When he had finished, Lokar looked up at the ceiling and released a long, troubled breath. "So the Empress is dead," she said, "and Sharakul effectively rules the Chosen through Sushin. But why has everyone come back before the day of Dark Return?" "I think," Tal said cautiously, "that the Ice Carls might be doing something. Mila thought they would." He found it hard to say the Ice Carl's name. Upsetting. "What are you going to do?" asked Lokar. "Find my mother and give her the antidote," Tal said firmly. "Then I will climb the Orange Tower and release my father from the keystone there. After that, I will do whatever I can to stop Sharakor and Sushin, to save the Veil." Lokar nodded. Then she held out her hand. "Give me the red keystone. It is sealed again now. I will return it to its rightful place in the Red Tower so it may power the Veil once more. Even if Sharakul does manage to unseal the other keystones, or tries to lower the Veil from the 7th Tower, the red keystone will keep it going. A single stone will keep the Veil up for 7 days by itself. That may be enough, some time to buy a chance of reversal." Tal handed her the keystone. "But you won't have a sunstone once you put it back." "I might be able to get one on the way," replied Lokar. "But even if I don't, returning the keystone is the most important thing." She knelt again before Tal, giving him light from the red keystone, despite his attempts to raise her up. "Don't kneel to me," he protested. "I should be kneeling to you. You're the guardian of the red keystone." "And as a guardian, I can see that you are not just the welder, but the true guardian of the violet keystone," replied Lokar. "Which means you are also Emperor of the Chosen, whether you want to be or not. Wish me light and fortune, Highness." "Light and fortune," croaked Tal. He was Emperor of the Chosen? The boy who couldn't even get a sunstone a few months ago? "Light and fortune to you, Highness, and to us all." Lokar rose and left, her spirit shadow hopping after her as Tal stared and stared into space.
"Does that make me Emperor of all spirit shadows?"
asked Adris, who had been very interested in Lokar's obeisance. "No," replied Tal in a faraway voice. "It doesn't make me Emperor either, no matter what Lokar says." He shook his head. Think like an Ice Carl, he told himself. The immediate object was to get to his mother. She was probably in his family rooms, but even with all the confusion, Sushin would still make sure Grail was guarded, or there would be traps. The first thing to do was find another disguise, a mid-ranking chosen's robes, and he would have to work out how to stop his sunstone being so obviously violet. Then he would check to see exactly what was going on, and what all the panic and eye-nair and the shouting here was about.